Okay, let's take a look at how to divide decimals by a whole number. We took a look at the chocolate bar that Miss Calvert had let me borrow, that giant chocolate bar, and it was called Pound Plus. So we were talking about how many ounces are in a pound, and we said they were 16. We talked about that the chocolate bar weighed more than a pound. And then we were talking about the fact that if this was 17 and 6/10 ounces, how could we divide it up between the three teachers, Miss Calvert, Miss C, and myself? So we were thinking to ourselves, what could we estimate here? What number does 3, if multiplied by 3, gets us close to something over here? And if somebody had said 5, let's try 5. So because we know 3 times 5 gets you 15, it's close. So it's a good way to start. So we started by putting 5 ounces to each teacher. Okay, so after we've taken our 5 ounces and given it to each person, we have our 17 and 6/10. We're going to take away the 15 ounces that we gave away already to each of the teachers. So we have, when we subtract that as decimals, we just bring the decimal down, and we have 2 and 6/10 left. So we have to think about, now we have still three people. How can we divide 2 and 6/10? I'm going to think of this in terms of 26, and what number multiplied by 3 gets me close to 26? And I know that I could think of a lot of different numbers here, but I'm going to try to get as close as I can to this number. And I know 3 times 8 gets me 24. But now I have to remember that there's a decimal here. So instead of it being 8 wholes, I'm going to say I'm going to give away 8/10. If you remember, we were using the base 10 blocks when we were doing this activity in class. So it was like I was giving away 8 of those little small squares. So I'm going to give 8/10 to each teacher. And 8/10, 3 times 8/10 gets me 24, except I have to remember that there's a decimal there. When I multiply by a decimal, I have to look at how many numbers are to the right of the decimal, and I'm going to jump that many. So I'm going to take away 2 and 4/10, and now I had 2 left over. So there's no way here for me to do 3 divided into 2 evenly. And even if I kept going and going and going, I was going to wind up with a remainder. So we're going to just leave it as is, that this was the best we could do. I think in class we actually changed this number to a 4 so that we could get it a little closer. And so we're going to just stop here. And this is what I mean by dividing it out amongst different people. That's what we did. And then we would total up what's in here, and we had given 5 and 8/10 of an ounce to each person. And that would be my quotient. 5 and 8/10. And in this case, I have a remainder, but since we know we can't divide this any further, we're just going to leave that one alone and call it a day. Let's try this one. So now we're going to look at 1 and 2/10 of a Kit Kat bar, and we're going to divide that up between the three of us again. So this is easier because this is a visual here. Okay, and this is really what a Kit Kat bar looks like. But we're going to pretend that these are our base 10 blocks, the flat block, and these are going to be our rods. So what we decided to do this way was we were kind of trying to put them in groups of 3 people, because that's how we have to divide this up. And so we looked at this in terms of these are each equal to 1/10. Everything on here. So this is our whole, and this is our 2/10, 1 and 2/10. So we need to figure out, we said it to ourselves, well, we're going to look at this and think of it as kind of the number 12. And considering I have 3 people to divide it by, I'm going to think 3 times 4 gets me to 12. So what if I gave everybody 4 tenths blocks, or 4 chunks of Kit Kat? So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's another one. Okay, so we're going to circle 4/10, groups of 4/10. So we have another 1, 2, 3, 4. And as it turned out, because I estimated well in the beginning with the 12, it actually is 1.2. So we know these are 1, 2, 3, 4/10. And when I multiply 3 times 4/10, I get the 12. This will be my check. And then I know there's one number to the right of the decimal, so I'm going to go whoop, right in there, and I get 1.2. So that's how we're talking about grouping these things and setting them up into like the circle groups. We're going to try that on the next page. Okay, so this one says, what is 25 cents divided by 5 people? I know many people can just do this mentally and say, oh yeah, 5 times 5 is 25. And that's the idea here. So but we're looking at it in terms of what are we doing here? This is actually having 25 hundredths. So it's not tenths. You have to be careful of that fact. So we know 5 times 5 gives us 25. And since we're talking about 25 hundredths, it's kind of like when we were working with the little base 10 blocks. It's like we're giving away, we have 25 of these little cubes, or 25 pennies, you can think about it, because a penny is really equal to 100th of a dollar. And we can start out by just saying, well, I'm going to give each person 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 a 5 hundredths. So I'm going to give 5 here. I'm going to give 5 hundredths here. 5 here. And you can bring home your base 10 blocks to do this. Remember that with your base 10 blocks, the little cubes are your hundredth. The bars, or the rods as we were calling them, equals 1/10. And then your big giant cube is worth 1 unit. And most of the time we're considering that the ones, 1.0. So this is all we're doing when we use these circles or bars. We could have used this as a bar model as well. And then when we talk about repeated subtraction with this, just to check our work, we started with 25 hundredths. We took away 0.5, wind up with 0.20, took away another 0.05. That's where the repeated subtraction comes into play. And we keep doing that until we've gone through 1, 2, another person, this is the third person, and so on. So your job is really to draw some kind of model similar to this, similar to the one on the other page, one of the other pages like this, or drawing a model like that to help you to understand how to divide out these decimals. Use your base 10 blocks if you need to, and then ultimately we'll be transferring that into word problems like this. You can estimate and solve using your base 10 blocks and pictures, and then you're going to draw some kind of a picture. That's part of our problem solving strategies.